and now reports the death toll at over 10,000. That is a sobering number. If you missed yesterday's briefing, you missed yet another display of fireworks. The president seems to get a little more feisty when he holds the briefings in the Rose Garden. We're back in the Rose Garden today. The temperature in Washington, D.C. is only 54 degrees at present. A few of the correspondents have commented that there may be something slightly passive-aggressive in surprising the press association with having to go outdoors. Not all of them brought as warm clothing as they would have if they knew they were going to be spending potentially 2 hours sitting in the Rose Garden. Yesterday, the president went on quite a tear. He announced that in the midst of this global pandemic, he is going to be cutting off funding to the World Health Organization. It's unclear whether he has the legal authority to do this. Democrats say that blocking funding that has been allocated by Congress is against the law, and that it was this very same breaking of the law that led to his impeachment when he blocked the flow of congressionally allocated taxpayer funds to Ukraine. We're going to see the President of the United States at any moment. He should be coming out. I see there are some TV screens, so I imagine there will be a visual aid portion of today's event. While we're waiting for him, we'd like to try to answer your questions, so if you could type them in the comments, my team and I will do our best to answer whatever questions you have. So yesterday was very much about pointing the finger. President Trump blamed the World Health Organization for this crisis. He blamed governors for it, and he blamed the Obama administration. I want to walk through just a little bit of timeline again, because President Trump's big objection to the way the World Health Organization responded is that he says that they did not act quickly and that they were not transparent about the gravity of the threat that was posed. So let's just review the timeline a little bit. January 9th was when the World Health Organization reported that there was a mysterious pneumonia-like illness in China that was a novel coronavirus, the same type of pathogen that had caused the SARS epidemic in 29 countries in 2002 and 2003. That day, President Trump held a rally. The next day, January 10th, the World Health Organization issued a comprehensive package for technical guidance with advice to all countries for how to detect, test, and manage potential cases. President Trump did not act upon that. January 23rd, the World Health Organization held an international news conference confirming a basic picture of the virus that still holds up reasonably well today, describing it again as a novel coronavirus spreading person to person, more transmissible than the seasonal flu, and 40 times deadlier, with an estimated fatality rate of 4%. January 24th, the very next day, this is important that I bring up this next part, because one of President Trump's complaints about the World Health Organization is that he said that they were too nice to China. And on January 24th, President Trump tweeted, "China has been working very hard to contain the coronavirus. The United States greatly appreciates their efforts and transparency. It will all work out well. In particular, on behalf of the American people, I want to thank President Xi." On January 23rd, Chuck Schumer called for a national public health emergency in response to the World Health Organization's statement. President Trump did not act upon it. By January 30, the World Health Organization was raising greater and greater alarms. On January 30th, the World Health Organization declared officially a global health emergency. This was 6 weeks before President Trump would declare an emergency. What did President Trump do after the World Health Organization declared a health emergency? He held a rally. February 3rd, the World Health Organization released a strategic preparedness and response plan to help protect countries with weaker health systems. On February 6th, the World Health Organization began distributing 250,000 tests around the world. They offered them to the U.S. The U.S. declined. Around this time, the CDC produced a total of 90 tests, which turned out to be faulty. I see now that reporters are putting on their heavier coats. It is only 54 degrees. It is a chilly day for sitting around in the White House Rose Garden. So, February 6th, the U.S. turned down the World Health Organization's help. February 7th, President Trump tweeted, "Just had a long and very good conversation with President Xi of China. He is strong, sharp, and powerfully focused on leading the counterattack on the coronavirus. He feels that they are doing very well."
Speak loudly.
And he said he will be successful, especially as the weather starts to warm and the virus hopefully becomes weaker and then gone. Great discipline is taking place in China as President Xi strongly leads what will be a very successful operation. And later that day, he said, "I think he's handled it really well." February 10th, he says, "I think China is very professionally run in the sense that they have everything under control." On February 18th, he said, "Look, I know President Xi loves the people of China. He loves his country, and he's doing a very good job with a very, very tough situation." March 11th, as the number of cases has been steadily increasing, the World Health Organization upped its alarm bells and now declared it a global pandemic. Only on March 13th does President Trump finally declare a national emergency. This is after at least 6 U.S. states had already declared it. March 16th is when he finally puts forward a guidance to social distance. March 17th is the very first time that President Trump used the phrase pandemic. Remember, this is about a week after the World Health Organization had called it that. But he said, President Trump said, "I felt it was a pandemic long before it was called a pandemic." I want to remind you that just a week earlier he had compared it to the flu. So that is just a little fact-checking of where President Trump was with his criticisms of the World Health Organization. I see Dr. Birx is coming out. She is joining today. We don't know if she'll be allowed to talk. Yesterday, she sat for over an hour as the president laid out how he intended to reopen the country by May 1st, he suggested. You would think that he would have invited one of his top health advisors to say something about that. She is the coronavirus response coordinator for the White House. Her time is very valuable, but she was not given the opportunity to speak. She just sat there and watched as President Trump spoke. Let's see if she gets to speak today. So, if you're just joining us, my name is Alan Piper. I'm the senior politics producer for NowThis, and we are expecting the President of the United States at any moment. He has been tweeting today, building up anticipation of today's event. He likes to talk about the ratings of these press conferences, and it really has seemed in recent days as if he has been trying to package them like a reality TV show episode where there's a lot of drama, a lot of shouting, a lot of pointing of fingers, and so he's been hyping up today's episode of his briefing, and we're expecting him any minute. In the meantime, I'm going to start answering some of your questions. Oh, this is a good one. April asks, any truth to the fact that the checks were delayed due to Trump asking to have his name on them? And the answer is Yes. While nearly 17 million Americans are out of work, while nearly 30 million Americans are grieving lost loved ones and looking for how they will pay the next month's rent, how they will keep food on the table, how they will pay for the burials of their lost loved ones, President Trump requested that his names appear on the physical checks that are going out to offer relief funds. And this is likely to delay the delivery of these checks by at least a few days. It's important to note that the physical mailing of checks is going to take longer than the direct deposit of money into accounts. And so there is already the risk that some people will be waiting until September to get their checks. And this delay just adds a little bit more time to that so that President Trump can have his name on the check that you receive. Pamela asks, why is Michigan protesting their governor's shelter in place? The answer, thousands of demonstrators descended on the state capitol in Lansing, Michigan to protest Governor Gretchen Whitmer's stay-at-home order. This may be in part due to the fact that President Trump has repeatedly publicly disparaged her. He called her that woman in Michigan instead of Governor Whitmer. He suggested that Vice President Mike Pence should not even call her to deal with her in this crisis, even though Michigan is one of the states hardest hit by this crisis. He has publicly suggested that she and other Democratic governors may be falsifying their numbers to try to make him look bad. So it's not surprising that when the President of the United States talks this way, the citizens of her state may not believe her when she issues fact-based, urgent health guidance. And this gets to the fact that the President's efforts to discredit Democratic governors, to downplay the deadliness of this epidemic, have consistently contributed to this crisis becoming worse than it needed to be. So Governor Whitmer had ordered a very strict stay-at-home order. It prohibits Michiganders from traveling to in-state vacation residences. It restricts businesses to only a narrow set of businesses deemed as essential that can be open.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States, accompanied by the Vice President of the United States.
All right, well, here is the President of the United States. The team and I will do our best to fact-check him in real time as he comes out today. We'll see if he has any
thank you very
news to
much.
break for us.
Thank you. Big day today at the White House. All of American society is engaged and mobilized in the war against the invisible enemy. While we must remain vigilant, it is clear that our aggressive strategy is working, and very strongly working, I might add. New cases are declining throughout the New York metropolitan area. Cases in the Detroit and Denver metro areas.
This is not true that new cases are declining. New cases are increasing. The rate of increase is declining, suggesting that the curve is being flattened. But make no mistake, the number of cases continues to rise.
The peak on new cases. Hopefully that will continue, and we will continue to make great progress. These encouraging developments have put us in a very strong position to finalize guidelines for states on reopening the country.
The President says that we are in a very strong position. It's important to remember that there are currently in the U.S. over 630,000 cases. There have been over 27,000 deaths. The U.S. accounts for 30% of all the world's cases and 20% of the deaths. The U.S. not only has more cases than any other country in the world, the U.S. has more cases than the next 4 countries combined.
And I think we'll produce it again very fast. The medical and healthcare advances we've made are critical to our continued progress. We've rapidly developed the most expansive and accurate testing system anywhere in the world and have completed more than 3.3 million tests. To date, we have authorized 48.
This is misleading when the president says that our testing is in good shape. We rank 42nd in the country for testing per capita. The testing has been, there is no nationwide system in place, and governors in multiple states have been complaining that they do not have the tests they need to keep their communities safe.
Tests could be available to screen up to 20 million people in a matter of weeks. My administration is also distributing vast amounts of medical supplies to states across the country through Project Airbridge, which has been an amazing success. We have completed 44 flights, and these are flights of very, very large airplanes, massive cargo planes. 44 flights of critical supplies as of today, and an additional 56 flights scheduled in the near future. We have some very brilliant people working on this. It's logistically incredible what they've done. And we've also been working on this with the military. And these people have been, the genius of all of them together has been incredible to watch. In total, through all channels, the federal government has developed and delivered 39.4 million N95 masks, 431 million gloves, 57 million surgical masks, and 10.2 million gowns. We ordered 500 million masks, and they'll be coming shortly. And we've distributed 100 million masks. Following our use of the Defense Production Act, GM announced that its first ventilators come off the assembly line in Kokomo, Indiana. Great place. They did it in 11 days from start to finish, a remarkable testament to the ingenuity of the American worker.
Now, regarding these supplies, President Trump said that his administration was helping states, but the federal government has been outbidding many states in their own efforts to collect personal protective equipment. Hospitals around the country are complaining that they do not have the protective gear necessary to keep their own workers safe. And the CDC has found that more than 9,000 U.S. healthcare workers have been infected with the coronavirus. In New York, doctors and nurses are no longer able to get tested because the tests are so scarce that they are being saved for patients. And doctors and nurses who lack personal protection do not know whether they are keeping themselves safe and are putting themselves, their families, and their patients at risk as a result. The president is playing a video with inspirational music showing the building of equipment. That does not change the fact that our hospitals across the country are in desperate condition.
I know you got a little bit nervous when you saw there was a clip about ready to be played, but that was sent to us by General Motors, and we thought it would be a good one to play. It's amazing. It's, what they've done in a very, very short period of time. They're now making thousands of ventilators, and they're coming out of the factory very rapidly at a clip that nobody can even believe. But we have others also doing it, and these are very high-grade ventilators. So we're helping a lot of people, and at this moment, nobody needs them. We have to remember, during the surge, nobody's needed them for weeks now. But we'll have them.
The president repeatedly falsely claims that these ventilators are not needed. There are over 4,600 patients currently on ventilators in the state of New York. A classmate of mine from college has just come off of a ventilator here in New York. His life was saved by it. We have confirmed reports of people who have died needing a ventilator and not getting one. We know that the New York Times has reported that thousands of ventilators delivered to states by the federal government turned out to be broken. And there is reporting that shows that GM will not be able to complete the government's order of 30,000 ventilators by the end of August. This is according to CNN. Remember that many states are hitting the peak now, or are about to hit the peak long before the end of August.
And we're very honored to be working with them. They include antivirals and also, and they something which is incredible, keeps the virus from multiplying, a mechanism that keeps the virus from multiplying, immune therapies that prevent the immune system from overreaching to the virus, and convalescent plasma treatments that use antibodies from the blood of recovered patients. So we have a lot of patients who recover, and they're so happy to have recovered that the first thing they do is say, we want to give our blood. And they do that. It's incredible. We have thousands of people that are doing that. They recover. They feel they have an obligation because they've gotten such great care. And a lot of them didn't think they were going to make it. As the entire U.S. government works to combat the global pandemic, it is absolutely essential that the key positions at relevant federal agencies are fully staffed, and we're not allowing that to take place through our Congress. They're just not giving it to us. We have many positions that are unstaffed because we can't get the approvals. The Democrats are holding us up. We cannot get approval. We've gotten judges because we go through the process. I guess we're up to 448 federal judges, and that we've gotten because we focus on it. We take the maximum time because no matter who the judge is, they take vast numbers of days and hours to approve and leaves no time left for others. Very unfair system. If a judge is going to be approved in 1 hour in one session, it doesn't matter. They'll take the maximum number of hours and days, you're talking about days, to get one judge approved.
The president is lashing out at Democrats. He's complaining that he's not getting his judges approved. The fact of the matter is that he has gotten judges approved at a record pace. He is claiming that there are key positions that are not filled because Democrats are blocking them. The fact of the matter is that there are multiple high-level security positions that have no one in place or only an acting person in place because President Trump has declined to appoint a permanent person.
And I've read over the couple of years, well, I didn't fill positions. I don't fill positions. In some cases, we don't need the position, and I'm all for that. But in many cases, you do, but we can't get them approved by the Democrats. They won't release them. The positions include the Director of National Intelligence, 2 members of the Federal Reserve Board of Governors, the Assistant Secretary of Treasury for Financial Markets of the United States, and the Undersecretary of Agriculture responsible for administering food security programs. And Sonny Perdue, who's going to be speaking today, is saying, please, can I have this man, can I have this particular person approved as soon as possible? He's been telling me that for a long time, and the Democrats won't allow it to happen. Again, every single judge, every nominee we have goes through maximum, or at least they go through a long process. So it takes days and days, and there's no time left, and it's just a concerted effort to make life difficult.
This is not true. President Trump is exaggerating the case. He has gotten his judges filled and approved at a record pace. It is the constitutional responsibility of the Senate to advise and consent. It is a little rich for Republicans to complain about members of an administration being blocked. So many judges are now being filled by President Trump because so many were blocked by Mitch McConnell when President Obama tried to appoint them. Republicans even tried to block an appointment of a library to the Library of Congress under the Obama years.
Appointment, it's called. The Senate's practice of dabbling into so-called pro forma sessions where no one is even there has prevented me from using the constitutional authority that we're given under the recess provisions. The Senate should either fulfill its duty and vote on my nominees, or it should formally adjourn so that I can make recess appointments.
Now, it seems that yet again, it's interesting. There's a new villain every day at these press conferences. Yesterday, the World Health Organization was the villain. It was the World Health Organization's fault that we're in this crisis. Now it seems to be Senate Democrats. Senate Democrats are slowing his nominations down, and that has somehow caused the spread of coronavirus. I want to point out that President Trump has failed to appoint someone to be a permanent Secretary of Homeland Security, to be a permanent Director of the Office of Management and Budget, to be a permanent White House Chief of Staff, or to be a permanent Director of National Intelligence.
To adjourn both chambers of Congress. The current practice of leaving town while conducting phony pro forma sessions is a dereliction of duty that the American people cannot afford during this crisis. It is a scam what they do. It's a scam, and everybody knows it, and it's been that way for a long time. And perhaps it's never done before. It's never been done before. Nobody's even sure if it has, but we're going to do it. We need these people here. We need people for this crisis, and we don't want to play any more political games. I've been waiting for 2.5 years, 3 years for some of these people.
This is not true. It is important to note that President Trump personally fired a lot of the people who would be involved in preparing for a pandemic. He got rid of President Obama's Global Health Security Unit, which was part of the National Security Council, which the Obama administration had put in place to prepare for this very type of event.
They know should be approved immediately, and they could do it in one session, and they could do it in 1 hour. And instead it takes them many days. In order to advance the health and security of our nation and all nations, as we announced yesterday, the U.S. government has put a hold on funding to the WHO, World Health Organization, pending a review of the organization's cover-up and mismanagement of the coronavirus outbreak. Over the objections of the WHO, we took decisive action and early life-saving action to suspend travel from China. They didn't.
This is not true. Again, the president is blaming the World Health Organization. He is falsely claiming that he acted earlier than the World Health Organization did. The World Health Organization declared a global emergency 6 weeks before President Trump did. It produced 250,000 tests a month before the U.S. began any serious testing. And President Trump is claiming that the World Health Organization objected to the travel restrictions that he placed on China. They did not object to the travel restrictions. They only warned that travel restrictions in and of themselves cannot stop a pandemic.
I'm sure they didn't know the gravity of it, but perhaps they knew. Because if they knew the gravity, that would be an even worse offense. To ease the economic pain of millions of American families, we've now processed $300 billion in loans to more than 1 million small businesses through the Paycheck Protection Program. This action has saved millions of American jobs. It's been an incredible success.
It is an exaggeration to call it an incredible success. For starters, it is a little odd to brag about the success of a program that is, in essence, responding to a crisis. But also, the rollout of this program has been problematic. The administration released specific details of how these loans would be given only on the late at night, the night before banks were supposed to begin issuing loans, meaning that many banks did not know what process they should be using when they began receiving applications for these loans. Many banks were so overwhelmed that they were unable to process the loans, and many banks barred loans to anyone with whom they did not have existing business, which means that if you are a small business owner who has not been dealing in loans with a bank in the past, now when you need a loan for the first time, it's even harder to get one.
For critical industries. In a few moments, Agricultural Secretary Sonny Perdue will elaborate on how these guidelines apply to our nation's dedicated workers in the food processing profession, because it's a profession. It's incredible what they do. Food processing, and they're keeping our grocery stores full. The shelves are not bare like the shelves that I inherited when we took over the stockpile, the medical stockpile, where the shelves were bare. The cupboard was bare, I say. Tomorrow...
President Trump weirdly taking an opportunity to put in a dig at President Obama. It's important to remember that President Obama did multiple things to prepare the next administration for the potential of a pandemic, including preparing a 69-page pandemic playbook, which President Trump discarded. President Trump's own military advisors from the Pentagon warned him in the first year of his administration that the medical stockpile reserves were low, and he did not act then. He was warned in 2017. He did not act then. It is now, only now, that he is boasting about the number of ventilators that are being made now, not back in 2017, not back in January when the World Health Organization first warned of this crisis.
Again, not all states are the same. They're very different. Some are having very little problem. Some have done such a good job that they have very little problem, and they're ready to go. So Vice President Pence and I will be speaking with the governors tomorrow. We'll be discussing procedures. Today I spoke with the leaders of many of our nation's most renowned companies and organizations on how to achieve the full resurgence of the American economy. My discussions included top leaders in health and health care, transportation, technology, financial services, food, beverages, hospitality, real estate, retail, agriculture, construction, energy, labor, manufacturing, and sports industries. We want to get our country open again. We want to have our sports leagues open. You want to watch sports. It's important. We miss sports. We miss everything. We want to get back. These experts and innovators.
I want to point out, President Trump has taken a lot of time in the past two briefings to talk about the importance of getting sports teams back. In New York City, we are facing the fact that there have been over 10,000 deaths in this city alone. Mass graves are being dug on public land to provide temporary burial for people, the bodies, who are overwhelming the morgues and the funeral homes. And the president has devoted a lot of time to how problematic it is that there are not sports for us to watch.
People, but more importantly, very smart people and people that love our country. They talked about the vital importance of our wide array of relief measures to address the present crisis, and they provided valuable insights on how to move forward, including on the role of protective gear, where we have tremendous amounts of protective gear coming in, robust testing, and the future use of therapies and treatments. They also underscored the crucial...
What the president is saying about the great amount of supplies that are being provided to the states and the robust testing, it simply is not true. The Chicago Sun-Times broke the news today that Governor Pritzker of Illinois secretly chartered private planes to fly medical equipment from China to the U.S. because he could not get that equipment from the federal government, and he feared that if President Trump found out he was doing it, that President Trump would attempt to confiscate the equipment. He said in an interview with CNN last night, "We have gotten very little help from the federal government. I've given up on any promises that have been made. I hope something will get delivered from the federal government, but I don't expect it anymore." The president is at this point near irrelevant when it comes to this question of testing, because he is so short of supplies for testing, which are not being provided by the federal government.
go ahead. We'll forge an even brighter future today than we had, and we'll be, along with other nations, hopefully, we're working with other nations, we'll be the comeback kids, all of us, all of us. It's incredible what's going on. I'm very proud of the people of this country. I'm very proud of the people I spoke to today. These are truly great, brilliant people, and we've gained tremendous insight. So tomorrow's going to be a very big day. We're going to be speaking with the governors. We'll have some information on some openings. And again, we'll have some openings that will exceed our expectations, and they'll be safe, they'll be strong, but we want to get our country back. We want to get our country back, and we're going to do it, and we're going to do it soon. With that, I'd like to ask Dr. Birx to come up and say a few words, and then Secretary Sonny Perdue, and then Vice President Pence. Thank you very much. Thank you.
So Dr. Birx is going to speak. It is striking that she was not given the opportunity to speak yesterday. She attended the briefing. She is the coronavirus response coordinator for the task force, and yet she was not allowed to speak.
We've seen declines in cases across the country, and this has been very reassuring for us. At the same time, we know that mortality and the fatalities that we're facing across the United States continue. We know the number of people who are still in the hospitals, in the ICUs, and we want to continue to recognize the healthcare workers who are on the front lines and really recognize how low the United States case fatality rates are compared to other countries. And this is really due not only to our technology, but how that technology is utilized to save lives. At the same time, I'm inspired.
It is important to note that the U.S. has more deaths at this point than any other country, and accounts for 20% of the world's deaths from the coronavirus.
That have less than 1,000 cases and less than 30 new cases per day. So we're looking at states and metro areas as individual areas. We talked before how each of these curves are different. Each of the cases' experiences are different. We have some states like California and Washington State, Oregon, that never really had a peak because of so much work that their populations did to decrease and keep the new cases down. So each of these individual states and individual metros are being studied very specifically. I do want to highlight, and we are remaining concerned, and we've been having discussions with Rhode Island. Rhode Island and Providence are in a unique situation. First, they had increasing cases from the New York City area, and now they have new increasing cases from the Boston area. They're caught between two incredible hot spots in the country. They're doing an extraordinary job. They're caring for the individuals in the front lines, but Providence continues to have new cases. And we do continue to work with specific states that have specific outbreaks related to individual occurrences. I will just remind the American people again, this is a highly contagious virus. Social gatherings, coming together, is there always a chance that an asymptomatic person can spread the virus unknowingly. No one is intending to spread the virus. We know if you are sick, you will stay home. But to all of you that are out there that would like to join together and just have that dinner party for 20, don't do it yet. Continue to follow the presidential guidelines. We really appreciate the work of the American people. We see as a country we're improving. We see as metro areas we're improving. We see as communities, as counties, and as states we're improving. But that also still requires everyone to continue to social distance. And in the end, we do have states that have very few cases and very few new cases. And so these are the ones the President is referring to that have been silent, relatively silent throughout this epidemic and pandemic that many of us have faced. And so these are the groups we're working with very specifically. And each of these governors and each of these mayors will have to make decisions after generalized guidelines are put out so that they can do what's best for their communities. They are at the front line. And I wanted to conclude by really thanking my PEPFAR teams around the world who have been working tirelessly throughout the world to ensure that Africa and Asia doesn't experience this level of infections that we have seen here. They've turned over their capacities from their embassies Our U.S. hires throughout the world, our ambassadors, are still on the front line with our local staff, working with ministries of health to confront this virus around the globe. And I assure you that they are continuing to invest in the health structures, the laboratory, and the frontline care to ensure that all of the work that we have done against TB, HIV, and malaria continues, but that we use our capacity, our laboratories, our clinics, our hospitals that have been built by the American people and the generosity of the American people to really combat this COVID-19 around the globe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Doctor. Sonny, please.
Next speaking will be Sonny Perdue, the Secretary of Agriculture. I do want to note that a Politico examination of Perdue's list of appointments when he was governor found that there were more than a dozen instances where he gave positions to business associates and campaign donors, and other occasions where he rewarded his state staff with opportunities in his agriculture and shipping empire after he left office. He signed a law giving himself a tax break, and when he was found to have violated Georgia law by funding his campaign accounts with contributions from his private enterprises. In an interview with CNN in 2019, Perdue said that we don't know the cause of climate change, adding, it's weather patterns, frankly, and they change. As I said, it rained yesterday. It's a pretty nice day today. So the climate does change in short increments and in long increments. So that is the scientific expert who is speaking now.
Symptoms while on the job should go home immediately, and the interim guidance is in line with CDC's recommendations for healthcare workers caring for those sick with COVID-19. So we appreciate the dedication and commitment of all the brave men and women working to keep their communities fed, and we will continue to work with the CDC to keep those individuals as safe as possible during these challenging times. In that vein, there's been a lot happening this week as COVID-19 is impacting food processing facilities, as you know. For Americans who may be worried about access to good food because of this, I want to assure you the American food supply is strong, resilient, and safe. And in fact, our food supply chain has shown tremendous agility in shifting production and logistics so suddenly from restaurant and institutional settings to retail settings. To all the employers out there in this sector, it's critical that you follow CDC guidelines and guidance and best practices to keep all of your employees and people safe and healthy. To employees and local public health officials advising them, the CDC has issued guidelines on how to mitigate a situation if you have a positive case in one of your facilities. We need our local health authorities and our state health authorities to do everything they can to balance the demand of keeping our facilities operational and our critical industries going, while at the same time keeping the health and safety of employees as a top priority, as well as our communities. So I want to also take this time to thank all of our critical essential food supply chain workers. The entire country is counting on these patriotic individuals by doing the work in our food supply chain. These dedicated workers include obviously farmers and producers, but also processors, truckers, and grocery store workers, as you know. America's depending on what you have, the food we need to feed our families, and you're the ones who are making that happen. Thank you.
I want to point out that many of the people, the jobs that the Secretary has highlighted there as being key to keeping food on our tables are professions that have been directly negatively impacted by this administration. Roughly 1 million farm workers are undocumented and are at risk because of this administration's policies. The grocery store workers that have been mentioned have been fighting for a living wage, and President Trump has said not only does he not want to increase the minimum wage, he would like to get rid of the minimum wage altogether. He wishes he could pay people less. Most of these people do not have paid sick leave, and they are being asked to stay home when they're sick. That may be asking them to choose between a paycheck and caring for their health and your health.
and you have a crash at one place, it backs up, and that's what's happened in the food supply chain, but we're working through that. Yet all this, through all this, our food supply chain has proven to be very resilient, just like American people. To the extent we have challenges, we have and continue to need to work through it all together, and we can and we will get through this with a whole of American approach, Mr. President, and a critical partnership between state and local health officials, the management of companies, and the employees, and we will meet any challenges we face by working together. Thank you, sir, for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. And before the Vice President comes up, I just wanted to say, speaking of Sonny, China has paid us billions of dollars, many, many billions of dollars in tariffs.
This is not true. If you've been tuning in these past few days, I've mentioned this a few times. This is not how tariffs work. I don't know if the president is lying or if he simply does not understand tariffs himself. Tariffs are not fees paid by the other country. They are essentially taxes imposed on the American importer and typically passed on to the consumers.
This very soon you'll let the farmers know. Nobody can take advantage of our farmers, so we have a lot of money that we've taken in from China. We're going to be distributing.
This is again false. China is not paying the tariffs on Chinese goods. You are most likely paying the tariffs on Chinese goods.
Of the United States. This has never happened to China before. They never gave us 10 cents. Now they're paying us billions of dollars, and we appreciate it.
China is not paying the tariffs. I don't know how many ways to say that. I also want to point out that a report from the Wall Street Journal chronicled farmers purposely dumping out milk and breaking eggs due to an excess and an inability to repackage those goods for retail sale, as they are typically packaged for restaurant sale. One vegetable supplier told the Journal that demand for his goods dropped 70% almost overnight, and that has prompted him to destroy some 250 acres of produce.
Coronavirus survivors here to the White House from across the country. Some more than 45,000 Americans have fully recovered. Sadly, we mourn the loss of more than 27,000 of our countrymen. Our hearts are with their families and with the families of all of those that continue to struggle with the serious consequences of this illness. But as Dr. Birx just reflected, despite the heartbreaking losses, we're getting there, America. Because of the efforts of people all across this country to put into practice the President's coronavirus guidelines, because of their adherence to the direction of state and local authorities, as Dr. Birx just reflected, we see great signs of progress from the West Coast to the East Coast.
Now, as we said earlier, not everyone is abiding by these guidelines, and in Michigan there have been protests where a Republican candidate for office gathered protesters to show up in a large group and protest the stay-in-place order. A big part of why people are distrusting these stay-at-place orders is because President Trump has used these briefings to cast aspersions on Democratic governors, to suggest that they are fear-mongering, and to suggest that they are somehow illegitimate.
As the President suggested, when we unveil the guidelines that the team has been working to present tomorrow to our nation's governors, we're going to reflect on the fact that, as the President said, there will be areas of the country that will require continued mitigation and strong efforts, and there will be other areas of the country that will be given guidance for greater flexibility. The President has so directed our team. When we think of more than 619,000 Americans having tested positive, more than 45,000 having recovered, we wanted to announce today that the FDA recently announced efforts to facilitate the development and access to convalescent plasma. Mr. President, you've spoken about this. People who have recovered from the coronavirus have antibodies in your bloodstream that can attack the virus. The Mayo Clinic today is working with the Red Cross to make sure that coronavirus patients have access to the convalescent plasma treatments, and over 1,000 institutions across America have already joined this program. And we want to urge every American who has recovered from the coronavirus for at least 2 and preferably 4 weeks to contact your local blood or plasma donation center and arrange to donate. It's one more way that the American people can do their part and step forward, and thousands have already done so. And
the Vice President is calling on Americans to donate blood. I want to highlight that while the U.S. government has loosened its restrictions, it still places obstacles for gay and bisexual men to give blood. Any man who has had sex with a man within 3 months is barred from giving blood. And so not everyone who is healthy and willing to help is able to give blood.
Over a 7-day period is 80 million masks. And FEMA is actually working as we speak to move facial masks to priority infrastructure, food supply, first responders. There'll be 6.5 million masks that go out before the end of this week, an additional 20 million before April the 20th, and then we'll be adding 6.5 million each and every week.
This increase in the number of masks that are being distributed highlights the fact that these steps could have been taken earlier. And there did not need to be a situation where here in New York, doctors are being asked to reuse masks that were intended for single use. Nurses have been wearing garbage bags instead of protective gowns.
It's the nation, literally by the thousands. In fact, as we stand here today, 576 doctors, nurses, and other military medical professionals have been deployed to 13 hospitals across the nation, 10 in New York, and 1 in Connecticut, Texas, and Louisiana each. And as the President reflected a few days ago, because we happily did not have the demand on the Javits Center and on the comfort in New York City, at the President's direction, we have deployed doctors and nurses from those 2 facilities to hospitals. In fact, the President and I were just speaking to Mayor de Blasio just before we came out, and he expressed his great admiration and appreciation for the relief that these medical military personnel have provided to incredibly dedicated people.
President Trump falsely suggested yesterday that the Javits Center and the Comfort were not actually being used. They are, and in fact, at least 2 coronavirus patients died in each facility yesterday.
Presidential guidelines for America. The truth is, because of what the American people have done over the last 30 days, we are slowing the spread. We are ensuring that every American family would have access to the health care that we want any member of our family to have, with the greatest health care professionals in the world. We're saving lives, and we're healing our land. And so we want to thank the American people for all you have done. And tomorrow we'll be presenting a new guidance to the governors of this country about how we build on our progress and reopen America in a safe and responsible way. Thank you, Mr. President.
On the recess appointment, Mr. President, if I could.
Mr. President? Steve, please.
You mentioned the possibility of adjourning both chambers of Congress. Could you explain what you meant by that, sir?
Very simple. If they don't act on getting these people approved that we need we need them anyway, but we especially need now because of the pandemic. We are going to do something that will be something I'd prefer not doing, but which I should do and I will do if I have to. Caitlyn.
President Trump is back on blaming Democrats in the Senate for his vacant spots. There are some nominees awaiting votes. I want to highlight that it is the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, who sets the timetable, and he can schedule to have these hearings and votes if he wishes to. He has been prioritizing the appointment of judges, however.
In the world, nobody has the quality of tests. If you look at Abbott, what they've come up with in a short period of time, they've been incredible. Roche has been incredible. We have the best tests in the world, and we will be working very much with the governors of the states. We want them to do it. We're not going to be running a parking lot in Arkansas. We're not going to be running a parking lot where you have a Walmart, which has been great, by the way. Walmart has done a fantastic job, but where you have a testing center and running that from Washington, D.C.
He's just saying that he's not going to be involved in a Walmart parking lot testing center. Roughly a month ago in the Rose Garden, he bragged that he was negotiating for Walmart to have parking lot testing centers. This has not come to pass. The U.S. is not doing well in terms of testing. There is no other way to put it. There is no national strategy in place, and there is a shortage of testing equipment, both the tests themselves and the materials needed to perform the tests. And because of this, governors of multiple states have said they cannot effectively protect their own communities.
And if we're not happy, we'll take very strong action against a state or a governor. If we're not happy with the job a governor's doing, we'll let them know about it. And as you know, we have very strong action we can take, including a close down. But we don't want to do that. We're working with the governors, and we're working closely with the governors. The relationship has been very good. Vice President has had a lot of conversations over the last 2 weeks with either 50 or almost 50 governors on every conversation, and they've been really positive conversations. We have the right to do whatever we want, but we wouldn't do that. But no, we would have the right to close down what they're doing.
The President of the United States does not have the right to do whatever he wants. That is a fundamental principle of the Constitution.
Go ahead.
You got me already.
Mr. President, why did you have your name added to these coronavirus relief checks?
Well, I don't know too much about it, but I understand my name is there. I don't know where they're going, how they're going. I do understand it's not delaying anything, and I'm satisfied with that. I don't imagine it's a big deal. I'm sure people will be very happy to get a big, fat, beautiful check, and my name is on it. Yeah, go ahead, please.
It is not true. The checks actually are being delayed so that his name can be printed on them. This has never been done before.
Recent cases from people that are coming from Boston and New York. You just said you'd like to reopen some states before May 1. How will you stop a second spike in cases if people are traveling between states? How will you control the flow of people?
Well, the governors can control that flow, as an example. In fact, I just saw a little while ago it was reported that certain borders are being controlled already by states. They're starting to take control of their borders, which is good. So they'll be controlling. They may do testing for people wanting to come in. I'd read that about Rhode Island, so they have to watch it. They have to be very careful.
He's suggesting that states can test people who want to come in. We don't have tests. The tests are not there. States cannot perform tests. To date, fewer than 1% of Americans have been tested.
Relationship with Canada is very good. We'll talk about that. It will be one of the early borders to be released. Canada's doing well. We're doing well. We'll see. But at some point, we'll be doing that. In the meantime, nations that are heavily infected, we have a lot of nations that are heavily infected. Some are getting better. Some are still on the way up, unfortunately. We're keeping very strong borders with those nations. But with Canada, we are talking about different things. Yeah, please.
Mr. President, you said the evidence suggests that nationwide we have passed the peak on new cases. What's your evidence for that? What are the numbers saying?
Well, all we're doing is looking at the numbers. We're looking at our graphs. We're looking at our models. We're getting a great response from Deborah and from Tony and from many of the professionals that are working. We have great professionals working with us. And I think based on that, we're doing very well. Based on that, it looks like we're headed absolutely in the right direction. But some states are looking at other states and they're saying, I can't imagine what they're going through because they're not in that position. They're in very good shape. I would say that we have 20 states at least, but you really have 29 that are in extremely good shape. You have others that are getting much better. And I think with almost few exceptions, you have every state that is either doing better or on the way to doing better. Yep.
That is simply not true. Some of the states that are getting much worse are the 8 Republican states that have not put in place stay-at-home orders. That's states with Republican governors. In Arkansas, the number of cases has nearly doubled since last week. In Iowa, the number of cases has roughly doubled since last week. In Nebraska, the number of cases has nearly tripled. And in South Dakota, the number of cases has gone up from 240 last week to over 1,000 cases, nearly 1,200 cases. And what's especially alarming in South Dakota is that there have been nearly 1,000 cases in the same city as one of the largest pork processing plants. And the governor refuses to put any sort of stay-at-home order in place. This is what is discouraging about how the president has turned this into a partisan political issue where Democrats take the issue seriously and Republicans feel that they are somehow supporting the president by not taking it seriously.
It was 2 years ago. We have people that have been waiting for 3 years, and we can't get them approved by the Democrats in the Senate because they're taking so long to approve our judges. Now, I have to tell you that
this is, again, he's back on this false topic. The president is getting judges confirmed at a record pace. It is Mitch McConnell who sets the timetable, so it's not really possible to blame Democrats for the delay. I'm going to check on that, whether there are people who have been waiting for 3 years. I find that unlikely, but I'm going to ask Ian McKenna in our newsroom to see if there's anyone who has been waiting 3 years for a hearing.
That time may be. And what they're doing by doing that is taking days to approve somebody that could be approved in a quick vote. People that get phenomenal reviews in committee are going maximum number of hours. And what they do is there's only so many hours in a day. Now, we could have said, let's stay. I would have been in favor of that. They didn't choose to do it. But I have a very strong power. I'd rather not use that power. But we have way over 100 people that we very badly need in this administration that should have been approved a long time ago. And one of them is the head of Voice of America. If you look at what they're doing and what they're saying about our country, it's a disgrace, the people that are running that. We have somebody that's really good, really talented, and that loves our country. And I want to get these people approved. That's one of many. We have professionals. Sonny, you've been waiting for, how long have you been waiting for the man that we're talking about coming in? 2.5 years. So Sonny Perdue just happens to be here talking about something else. So you've been waiting for one of the most important positions as Secretary of Agriculture is the position. It's distribution. We need it now. We're talking about shelves. We're talking about cupboards. He needs it. He's been waiting. He didn't know he was going to get this question. You've been waiting 2.5 years. The person is exceptional. That person left a very good job. And it's embarrassing to me. He'll say, do you think you'll get that man approved? He's been saying that to me for a long time. It's because of the Democrats. And what we're doing is, and I think anybody here would do it, judges are a priority. A federal judge who's going to sit for 50 years, potentially, a young judge going to be sitting for, that's always going to have to be a priority. But because they're taking so much time and approving they're trying to put us through the mill. That's when you talk about partisanship, and it's never, ever happened before.
This is simply not true. This is simply not true. That, first of all, it's not true that it's never happened before. There was record obstruction of President Obama's nominees. That is why President Trump inherited a record number of empty federal benches. And as I mentioned, Republicans even tried to block a librarian to the Library of Congress. Now, he's, I believe, the undersecretary that he's talking about for agriculture that Sonny Perdue has been supposedly waiting 2.5 years for. This person was nominated in January of this year. I believe he's talking about Brandon Lips, the nominee for Undersecretary of Food, Nutrition, and Consumer Services. So this person has not been waiting for 2.5 years. That was a nomination that was made this year. And in terms of judges, President Trump has appointed more judges than all of his predecessors other than President Carter. He has appointed 187 judges.
Suicide hotlines which are exploding, people losing their jobs. When you look at drugs and people that didn't take drugs and now they're becoming drug addicted because they're going through a problem, they have no job, they have no money coming in other than the money we're getting them. We've opened up the coffers to a large extent. We're helping people. This is why I wish the Democrats would help us a little bit with it, because they should. It's purely partisan what they're doing, and it's bad for our country. But you know, there is death by doing by having this strongly closed country. We have to get back to work. With all of that being said, we're going to start with states and with governors that have done a great job, and they're going to open it up as they see fit, and we're going to be right behind them, and we're going to be working. We're going to be supplying them with things if they don't have them. We want them to have them. We're going to be helping them with ventilators after the...
Now, President Trump has been going on. He's suggested many times that that if we keep the country closed, we're going to lose more people to suicides than to the coronavirus. I want to point out that he has strongly supported keeping gun sellers designated as essential businesses so that people can purchase guns. In fact, there are more curbside gun dealers legally operating in the U.S. now than there are drive-through testing places. And if you really wanted to reduce the number of suicides, you could make it a little bit harder to purchase guns.
In the back, please. Is anybody freezing? You know, it's very cold out here.
This is a true statement. It is cold out there. President Trump knew what the temperature was when he decided to move the briefing from the briefing room to the garden. At least one reporter has speculated that it was a passive-aggressive move to make the press uncomfortable.
Well, China, and that they have a certain number of cases and a certain number of that. Does anybody really believe that? Here's the story. We report everything. We're reporting the cases, and our reporting is good. We're reporting every death. In fact, I see this morning where New York added 3,000 deaths because they died, and they're now saying, rather than it was a heart attack, they're saying it was a heart attack caused by this. So they're adding. If you look at it, that's it. And everything we have is documented, reported. And what they are doing is, just in case, they're calling it this, and that's okay. That's okay. But we have more cases because we do more reporting. We have more cases because everything is down. But does anybody really believe the numbers of some of these countries that you've been watching and you've been reporting on, and then it's like they didn't have the big thing? There have been some really, really bad, heavily in really some countries that are in big, big trouble, and they're not reporting the facts.
President Trump has frequently used these briefings to not report the facts. The fact is that we account for 30% of the world's cases and 20% of the world's deaths. We have more cases not only than any other country, but than the next 4 countries combined.
The occurring virus, it emanated from a virology lab in Wuhan, that because of lax safety protocols, an intern was infected, who later infected her boyfriend, and then went to the wet market in Wuhan, where it began to spread. Does that correspond with what you have heard from officials?
Well, I don't want to say that, John, but I will tell you more and more we're hearing the story, and we'll see. When you say multiple sources, now there's a case where you can use the word sources, but we are doing a very thorough examination of this horrible situation that happened. Go ahead, please.
In your many conversations with President Xi, Mr. President, did you ever discuss with him State Department concerns about lax safety protocols that had been reported to the State Department from the embassy in Beijing about that laboratory?
I don't want to discuss what I talked to him about the laboratory. I just don't want to discuss it. It's inappropriate right now. Please, go ahead in the back.
Tim Alvia from Channel 9 Australia. There have been calls in our country for Prime Minister Scott Morrison to make funding for WHO conditional on reforms to the organisation. I wanted to get your thoughts on that, and if you had any advice for Mr. Morrison.
Look, I feel very badly about the World Health Organization, but it's been a tool of China. It's been, as I say...
President Trump continues to try to shift the blame for his own delayed action on the World Health Organization. I can't stress enough that the World Health Organization declared a global health emergency 6 weeks before President Trump did, produced 250,000 tests a month before the U.S. began any serious testing. He accuses the World Health Organization of being too pro-China, but his own statements in January and February were to praise China and to say that China was handling the situation well.
She thought it would be great. She wanted to show that this thing doesn't exist. These are people, I'll tell you, we have some politicians on the other side that don't know what they're doing. If you look at timelines, you got to look at some timelines. But the World The World Health Organization, just like the World Trade Organization, I'm telling you, I call them, they have been treating the United States for decades so badly, and they've been so in favor of China. China took off when it joined the World Trade Organization.
This is not true. China was a booming economy before it joined the World Trade Organization, and when the U.S. has brought disputes with China before the World Trade Organization, the U.S. has never lost.
Organizations, and believe me, I'm looking at that one too. We're winning a lot of lawsuits right now that we never won before in the past. We're winning a lot of money that we never won in the past. That's with the World Trade. But with the World Health Organization, what's happened there is a disgrace. Here's the other thing.
There is so much false being said here, but I want to highlight, he just said that we've never won cases before the World Trade Organization before, from the Peterson Institute for International Economics. U.S. officials have won cases against Chinese trade practices 20 times since 2004. They have never lost a case.
But there's something going on. There's something going on that's very bad. Now, the $500 million that we save, we're going to make a determination over a little period of time. But they're going to either have to make
The president also repeatedly exaggerates the size of the amount that we pay the World Health Organization.
In Africa with AIDS. People have no idea what we do and the money we spent. We were talking about it the other day, Doctor. We are spending billions of dollars to help people. In the case of one that Dr. Birx is very much involved in, AIDS, billions of dollars. And you know what? It's a great thing. Nobody talks about it. Nobody gives us credit. We do that, and we do it very directly. But we're spending billions of dollars to help people.
President Trump keeps using this phrase, nobody talks about it. I guess he means nobody talks about it on Fox News. The work that the U.S. has done through programs like PEPFAR to fight the spread of HIV and AIDS in Africa is talked about.
Be the suckers anymore. So it's cold out. We will talk to you tomorrow. Big day tomorrow. Very big day. Thank you.
President, if Dr. Tedros is removed, would you change your mind?
Okay, so President Trump has ended this briefing. This is actually maybe the shortest briefing he's given in a long time, perhaps because he got cold. I think that it's probably a relief for the reporters there who aren't being made to stand in the cold, and I think it's a little bit of a relief for our team here to get to finish this up a little early. I want to thank the team who have been supporting me today. That is Maddie Green, Kafish Harjai, Megan Hirschlein, Ian McKenna, Shelby Backlin, and others. Just a couple more facts. President Trump keeps going on about this World Trade Organization is unfair. The United States has used its influence on the WTO to make it harder for the WTO to resolve disputes. The United States has played such a central role in dismantling the DSS and plunging it into paralysis, but simultaneously promotes itself as the primary advocate for the multilateral trading system. The U.S. claims that the appellate body functions as in a manner that is actively unfair and detrimental to its interests. Any inaction on the WTO's part is partly due to the U.S. blocking appointment of new panel members once their terms are expired. So perhaps similar to Obamacare, President Trump is working to try to make a thing that work less well so he can complain about the way it works. Anyway, we're going to wrap this up early today. My name is Alan Piper. I'm the senior politics producer. Thank you for joining us. President Trump says that there is big news coming tomorrow, so we will be here to cover it with you. In the meantime, please take care of yourself. Stay safe. Wash your hands. Stay away from people. As it's been ruled here in New York, the governor has ordered that anyone who is going outside and is at risk of coming within 6 feet of another person must wear a face mask. Take these precautions seriously. The death toll has already been too high. We are rapidly approaching a place where all of us will soon have lost someone. I suspect many of you watching have already lost someone. So please, stay safe. Take care of yourselves. Take care of your loved ones, and let them know how much they mean to you. I'm Alan Piper. I will see you tomorrow. Thank you, and good night.